Hey guys, tonight we drift way back beyond history, beyond reason, straight into the myth-soaked haze of ancient Greece. You're not walking, you're gliding through clouds that smell like olive trees, past temples that hum with the sound of bees and egos, toward a mountain where even the gods can't agree on anything except who gets to talk the loudest. You float down beside a golden figure, shirtless, glowing, slightly hair, somehow perfectly tousled by the wind, even when there is no wind. He's lounging on a sun-warmed rock with his lute in hand, strumming aimlessly like someone hoping the world will stop and praise him just for existing. Meet Apollo, god of music, poetry, the sun, and unsolicited performances. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your local time and location in the comments. It's oddly fun to see how many people fall asleep to stories about cows and ancient deities at 2:17 a.m. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're reclining beside Apollo now. Not too close, mind you, because his glow radiates about 1.5 feet in all directions. You don't want to overheat. He's plucking a melody, soft, pretty, a little repetitive, and no one is listening. Well, no one else. You're there, sure, but you're not clapping, you're not weeping gently into a napkin. You're just existing, and for a god like Apollo, that's not enough. He plays louder, adds some minor flourishes, pauses meaningfully between chords, glances sideways to see if you're crying yet. You yawn. He stops playing, looks offended, as if your lungs have committed treason. Music, he says, should be felt in the chest, in the soul, in the very marrow of your being. You nod politely. You've heard this before, many times, from theater kids, from buskers on public transport, from people who start sentences with "as an artist." Apollo isn't just proud of his music. He is his music. It's less a talent and more of a personality trait. Unfortunately, Olympus has limits. Even other gods get tired of hearing the same 3 motifs over breakfast. Athena once stuffed her helmet with honey just to avoid listening. Dionysus started wearing grapevine earmuffs. And Artemis, his own twin sister, once pretended to be asleep for 6 weeks just to skip another sunrise jam session. So, the muses stage an intervention. It's gentle, of course, a song circle, lots of harmony. But the message is clear. You're amazing, Apollo. But maybe it's time to take your art to new ears. In other words, please go away for a bit. Apollo takes this not as rejection, but as an artistic challenge. He decides to bring divine music to the mortals. They'll understand him. They'll appreciate nuance. They'll cry. They'll faint. Maybe they'll even build statues of him, mid-chord hair, blowing artfully in non-existent wind. So, he descends. You descend with him. You land somewhere in Boeotia, which historically was a region more famous for sheep than sophistication. but it's sleepy, pastoral, and full of people who can't afford to say no to a god with glowing skin and a performance agenda. The village is small. You see a few farmers tending fields, some children poking mud with sticks, and most notably, a large brown cow. She's chewing, slowly, with the kind of expression that says, "I've seen things. I've lived through 3 festivals, 2 floods, and that time Hermes turned the blacksmith's hammer into a singing eel. I am unimpressed." Apollo sees her too, and something shifts in him. Maybe it's her calm. Maybe it's the fact that she hasn't even acknowledged him. Maybe it's the way her tail swishes without rhythm. How dare she? No groove. He steps forward, sits, tunes his lute with exaggerated precision. The cow blinks once. He strums a note, a clear golden hum that makes the grass lean a little in reverence. Nothing from the cow. He starts playing a melody, soft at first, then building layering arpeggios, like sunlight catching water, each note ringing out as if blessed by the heavens themselves. Still nothing. The cow chews, swallows, blinks again. A fly lands on her ear. She does not move. Apollo's fingers blur. He plays faster, more dramatic. A tempo so complex it would make a mortal bard weep in shame. The cow lowers her head and begins to chew again. At this point, even you feel awkward. There's a silence afterward, not the stunned kind, just silence. Apollo clears his throat. "Well," he asks. The cow looks at him, long, blank, then moos. One long, damp-sounding moo. Not musical, not expressive, just wet. It echoes across the pasture like a barn door swinging open during a wedding toast. Apollo's face twitches. He stands slowly, dusts off his tunic. "Interesting," he says, voice tight. Very well. If you consider that a performance, then I challenge you to a contest of music." You blink. Did he just declare war on a cow? Yes, he did. You stare at him, then at the cow, then back at him. But Apollo, radiant as ever, is already pacing in a slow, tight circle like he's warming up for an Olympic event that involves Harp's indignation and questionable decision-making. Meanwhile, the cow has resumed chewing. She is not offended. She is not amused. She is simply chewing. You can almost hear her thoughts, if she has any. And there's something like, "I hope the clover blooms today." The left patch tastes dustier than usual. Apollo, of course, takes her silence as a bold provocation. He lifts his chin, running his fingers along the neck of his instrument with the intensity of someone preparing to duel. With a sigh that probably he thinks sounds noble, he begins tuning again. You're not entirely sure what's happening anymore. Wasn't this supposed to be a vacation, a creative retreat, a little mortal outreach with lyres and soft sunlight? And now, here you are standing between a divine ego spiral and a herbivore with the vocal range of a damp bagpipe. You look around the village for reinforcements. Not that you want an audience, but someone needs to witness this. Because Apollo clearly won't stop himself, and the cow can't start herself. A few villagers shuffle closer, rubbing their eyes and squinting at the glowing stranger. "Is that one of those theater kids from Athens?" someone whispers. No, he's, the shiny one, with the harp, the one who turned that shepherd into a dandelion. Oh, him. They remain at a safe distance. The cow moos again, this time longer. A low, sustained note that manages to sound both bored and mildly resentful. It's the sound you'd make if someone woke you up from a nap, just to ask if you'd heard them snore. Apollo flinches. You can tell he's trying not to flinch, but, he flinches. He narrows his eyes and begins his performance again, more aggressively now. Gone is the soft pastoral melody of before. Now it's flourishes and complex chord progressions, a scale so high-pitched you briefly worry the cow will simply explode. But she doesn't. She blinks, swishes her tail once, and lets out another moo. It's almost the same moo, maybe a shade flatter, maybe not. Who could say, not Apollo? He looks like someone just slapped him with a wet toga. He turns to you. You heard that. You nod slowly. You did indeed hear it. It was unmistakably moo-ish. Apollo is pacing again. This is clearly a statement he declares, an artistic response, a provocation wrapped in simplicity. You glance at the cow. Her expression says, "I am literally just digesting breakfast." But Apollo is spiraling now. He begins describing the performance using words like meta-anti-melody and rural avant-garde. He is, in short, giving the cow more credit than the cow seems interested in accepting. Still, something about it is unsettling him. Because for all his divine musicality, Apollo has never quite faced ambivalence. Either his audiences weep faint or build temples. Not once has someone simply chewed. So he doubles down. He launches into another solo. It's wild, unhinged, all over the place. You don't even recognize the scale. Maybe it's divine. Maybe it's just experimental. The villagers are watching now, not out of reverence, but out of bored curiosity, like someone watching a man argue with a pigeon at the marketplace. One of them mutters, "The cow's still winning. You try not to laugh." Apollo stops, panting, beaming, expecting applause. The cow blinks once, glances to the side as if remembering something mildly interesting, and lets out another moo. This time, shorter, clipped, economical. It is somehow worse. Apollo nearly drops his lute. You step back, because this is where things go sideways. He raises a hand to the sky. Light gathers. His shoulders glow slightly brighter. You brace for thunderbolts, harp, lasers, divine lightning shaped like a treble clef. But instead, a familiar figure materializes, leaning against a fig tree, one foot crossed casually over the other, smirking. It's Hermes, god of travelers, of mischief, of inconvenient timing. He's holding a pouch of olives and a cup of what looks suspiciously like mortal wine. Having a concert, Hermes asks, eyebrow raised. Apollo growls. Yes, actually growls. A contest. He gestures wildly toward the cow, is challenging my art. Hermes looks at the cow. She moos again, short, disinterested, then sneezes. Apollo gasps. Hermes chuckles. Well, she does have tone, he offers. Apollo is not amused. You are. Deeply. Shall I judge? Hermes asks, sipping his wine. Apollo hesitates, but then, perhaps thinking that finally someone will take him seriously, he agrees. Very well, he says, but be fair. I'm always fair. Hermes lies. The villagers cheer, not for the art, not for the gods, just because they realize this might be the most entertaining morning since someone tried to teach a goat to play dice. The stage is set. The gods are ready. The cow is lying down. And you lean against the fence post, arms folded, watching a myth unfold that will absolutely never make it into the serious scrolls. Because who'd believe it? The crowd grows. Not because news has spread, no. That would imply urgency. And there is none of that here. Just a slow trickle of villagers curious about the glowing man with the harp and the cow that refuses to care. Old men shuffle over with walking sticks made from twisted tamarisk branches. Toddlers cling to their mothers' skirts, some chewing olives, others chewing their own fists. A few chickens arrive too for ambiance. One promptly falls asleep under a fig tree. Excellent taste. Hermes lounges against a sun-warmed rock, lazily tossing olive pits at a beetle. Apollo tunes again and again. He insists he's not nervous, just ensuring divine resonance alignment, which is a fancy way of saying he needs a moment. Meanwhile, the cow stretches out her legs. She's now lying completely on her side, half asleep, jaw still slowly grinding cud. It's giving unbothered queen energy. The villagers, sensing that something strange but ultimately harmless is about to happen, sit on logs or overturned baskets. Someone brings bread. Someone else brings wine. Someone inexplicably brings a small puppet. The puppet is never explained. Hermes claps his hands. Once. Opening act, go. Apollo stands. He glows a little brighter and plays. Oh, does he play? The melody starts soft, a breath, a whisper, the hint of morning sun on marble columns. His fingers move like streams over river stones. There are trills, slides, sudden pauses that ache with longing, and the villagers, they blink, shift, nod slowly. It's good, almost hypnotic. Even the chickens stop clucking. Apollo sees this. His chest expands. He pours more into the music now. It's thunder and sea spray mountains rising, lovers parting. He plays in scales that mortals don't have names for. At one point, a nearby fig tree leans slightly closer, as if curious. You admit it. You're moved, a little. The last note hovers in the air, like a feather caught in golden sap. Apollo bows deeply. There is silence. And then, polite clapping. A few villagers murmur their approval. One woman fans herself dramatically and sighs. I felt the trauma of the liar's childhood. Apollo beams. Hermes nods slowly, his face unreadable. Then, the cow. She shifts, unfolds herself from the earth with all the urgency of a sun-baked stone, stretches her back legs, then her front, lowers her head, and moos. One single note. Deep, flat, wet. It lasts 5 seconds. At most. A few villagers blink. One giggles. Another says, honestly, there's something there. Apollo turns red. Bright red. Like pomegranate wine at a wedding red. She didn't even try, he hisses. Hermes shrugs. Maybe she's post-genre. Apollo sputters. You can't be post-genre if you've never been in a genre. Hermes gestures for calm. Look, you had form, precision, drama, but she had stillness. She committed to the moo. He turns to the villagers. Vote. They look at each other. One man says, Apollo was beautiful. Another adds, but the cow, she was honest. Someone behind you mutters, I felt seen by the moo. Hermes raises both hands. Split decision, he declares. It's a tie. Chaos. Apollo stomps. Villagers murmur. The cow sits back down contentedly, resuming her chewing. She seems to have already forgotten the entire incident. Apollo steps forward. You can't be serious. Hermes grins. I'm always serious when it inconveniences you. A child raises their hand. Can we feed the cow now? Apollo throws his arms in the air. I invented music. You also once tried to seduce a tree, someone mutters. He turns sharply. That tree was complicated. You try not to laugh. The tension breaks like a dropped tambourine. People begin drifting away. Someone hands Apollo a loaf of bread as a peace offering. He refuses it. The cow gets it instead. She is thrilled. Her tail swishes. Her eyes half close in bliss. Apollo watches in disbelief as the villagers pet her, gently whispering sweet nothings. She, for her part, simply accepts the attention like a monarch mildly amused by her subjects. You sit beside Hermes, who offers you an olive. So he says, did the best musician win? You shrug. Maybe the best listener did. Hermes taps his chin. Or maybe he whispers, it's just that some mornings, the world needs less performance and more chewing. You laugh quietly. The cow moos once more, short, content, somewhere between a finale and a sigh. And just like that, the concert is over. The concert is over. And yet, somehow, no one leaves. They don't scatter or cheer or erupt into philosophical debate about the nature of auditory transcendence. They just linger. It's the kind of pause that happens when a dream ends and no one's quite ready to be awake. Apollo is pacing again, which, let's be clear, is not just pacing. It's divine pacing, each step landing like a thesis statement, each exhale a declaration of injustice. Dust swirls politely around his feet, refusing to touch his sandals. The cow, by contrast, is asleep. You don't know when it happened. 1 minute she was chewing, the next out cold, on her side again, full stretch, breathing like a bellows, the occasional twitch of an ear like she's dreaming of sweetgrass or a particularly satisfying sneeze. Apollo scowls at her. She's not even reflecting on the moment. Hermes, reclining fully now, and using a melon rind as a pillow, waves a hand lazily. Cows aren't known for retrospection. I gave her my best, and she gave you a moo. Apollo turns to you. You heard it. You saw the lack of form, the absence of melody, the emotional void. It wasn't even syncopated. You nod. It was very cow. He glares. You offer a small shrug that says, maybe that's the point. Hermes chuckles softly, the way a brother chuckles when he knows you've lost but wants to draw it out. Want my theory? He says. Apollo doesn't answer, but silence is as close to a yes as Hermes ever gets. I think Hermes says the moo got to you because it was unshaped, untamed, utterly free. And you, he gestures at Apollo with a fig leaf. You spend all your time shaping, taming, perfecting. Maybe you're jealous. Apollo opens his mouth to deny it, closes it, crosses his arms. Maybe, Hermes continues, the reason the villagers loved it wasn't because it was beautiful, but because it reminded them of themselves. Clumsy, unexpected, a little damp. You glance at the villagers, who are now in the middle of an impromptu puppet show. The puppet has grown horns. No one questions this. Apollo sits heavily on a rock. I'm not jealous, he mutters. I just don't understand how something so simple can feel so final. Hermes stretches. Maybe that's why cows don't compose symphonies. They don't need to. There's a silence again, this one more thoughtful than awkward. You feel it too, something unsettling in how complete the cow's performance felt. Not brilliant, not haunting, just complete, like a door gently closing. The sun climbs higher. Cicadas begin their shrill symphony from the trees. Apollo watches the sleeping cow eyes narrowed. I should smite her. You clear your throat. Hermes raises an eyebrow. Apollo sighs. I won't. But I should. She'd just moo through it, Hermes says. A pause. Then Apollo looks at you. You're mortal, he says. What do you actually think? It's a loaded question. And you're tired. And it's not like you've trained for this. But you answer honestly. She didn't try to be anything. She just was. And maybe that's the difference. Apollo stares at you for a long moment, then looks away. Being is overrated, he mutters. Only when you're bad at it, Hermes offers cheerfully. The villagers begin packing up. The puppet gets returned to its basket. Someone hands Hermes a loaf of sweet bread. He doesn't ask where it came from, but accepts it with the grace of a god who has never paid for food. Apollo finally stands, dusts off his robes, adjusts the strap of his lyre like a defeated hero, sheathing a blade after a duel that never really happened. Fine, he says. Let the cow have her moment. But next time, he trails off. Hermes smirks. You'll find a different opponent. I'll find a worthy one. Hermes nods solemnly. There's a goose down in Thessaly who plays a mean reed pipe. Apollo scowls. You smile. The cow snores gently, and the story, like the music, fades. Not with a bang, not with a crescendo, but with a quiet final moo that no one hears because it happens in a dream. You stay behind as the gods begin to drift away. Hermes, half hovering, half skipping toward the edge of the field. Apollo trailing behind like a brooding teenager whose talent show didn't go as planned. The villagers return to their daily rhythms. Bread gets kneaded. Goats get herded. Someone rehangs a laundry line that had fallen during Apollo's more dramatic chord progressions. But the cow, she's still lying there. You crouch near her, curious. There's nothing obviously magical about her. No golden aura, no mysterious eye glow, no unexpected speaking voice announcing timeless wisdom. She's just a cow. Breathing, blinking, chewing. And yet somehow you can't stop thinking about that sound. That long, steady, indifferent moo that cut through Apollo's melody like a spoon through overcooked porridge. You sit down in the grass beside her. She doesn't acknowledge you, which oddly feels appropriate. It's the same kind of quiet detachment you'd get from a waterfall or a particularly judgmental cat. Not unkind, just uninterested in your drama. You reach out and gently pat her side. It's warm. She's enormous. And there's a surprising sturdiness to her that feels older than Olympus itself. As your hand rests there, you start to wonder, what if that was the point? What if the moo didn't respond to Apollo? It ignored him, not out of disrespect, but out of insulation. A complete impermeable sense of peace. No need to perform, no urge to impress, no ambition to rise above. Just grass sunlight and enough internal stillness to withstand the full brunt of a god's performance without flinching. You glance back at the road, where Apollo and Hermes are now distant sparkles in the heat shimmer. You imagine Apollo, even now, mumbling about scales and meter and tonal sophistication. And the cow. She licks her own nose. You laugh. It bubbles out before you can stop it. A soft, slow laugh that feels like it's been waiting inside your chest since sunrise. Maybe that's why the story stuck. Not because of the performance, not because of the contest, but because someone so powerful, so talented, so loud, could be undone by someone who didn't even notice there was a game being played. It reminds you of something the old women in the village say: not every silence is empty. Some are full of grass. You lean back on your elbows and close your eyes. The sun is warm. The cow's breathing is slow and steady beside you, like a metronome set to nap mode. And for the first time in hours, you don't feel like you have to say anything clever or think anything profound or prove you've been paying attention. You just are. Somewhere, a bee buzzes past, a cart creaks, and the cow lets out a short, hiccuping moo in her sleep. It's not musical. It's not even intentional. But in its own way, it's perfect. You don't remember falling asleep. 1 minute you're lying in the grass beside a cow who may or may not be a philosopher in disguise, and the next you're blinking awake to the soft sound of distant flute music, and the smell of weight is that stew. Your stomach growls before you do. The cow is gone. No hoof prints, no trail of cud, not even a strand of hair left behind. Just a slight indentation in the grass, and the lingering sensation that you've missed something small, weird, and maybe just a little divine. You sit up slowly. The village is still there, but changed in that subtle way. All places change after an encounter with a god. It's not more magical exactly, just aware. Like the soil itself remembers being the floor of a very strange concert hall. You wander toward the music. It's not Apollo, thankfully, but a reed flute, low and wobbly, played by a boy sitting on the edge of a wooden water barrel. He's got muddy feet and a face full of freckles, and he stops playing when he sees you. "She gone?" he asks. You nod. He shrugs. "Figured. That cow's got places to be." You raise an eyebrow. He grins. "You think she's just a cow?" You hesitate. He laughs, like it's the most obvious thing in the world. "She's not. Not always, anyway." You wait for elaboration. You get none. Instead, he points at a pot simmering over a fire nearby. You hungry? You are. And somehow in this village where gods argue with livestock and music can hurt your feelings, stew seems like exactly the right next step. The boy serves you a bowl. It's thick with root vegetables, lentils, and something green that tastes like a secret. You sit together in comfortable silence, broken only by the occasional slurp and the boy's flute picking up again when he forgets you're there. After a while, he says, "You know what I liked best about her?" You glance up. "She didn't change," he says. Even when the fancy one played his whole sky song, she just mooed the same, like she didn't care who he was or who she was supposed to be. He chews a chunk of carrot. Most folks, they'd try to sing prettier, or quieter, or louder, something. You nod, but not her. She mooed like she always mooed, didn't need applause. You think about that, about how often people twist themselves into knots trying to sound right, look right, be right, and how rare it is to just be. Maybe that's the real song you murmur. The boy wrinkles his nose. Sounds like something Apollo would say. You both laugh. You finish your stew. The boy offers you more. You decline. You don't want to fill up too much because you get the feeling something else is coming. The wind shifts slightly. The trees rustle. And you hear it again. Distant, faint, familiar. A single, unhurried moo. You stand. You don't know why, but your feet start moving toward the sound. Past the cooking fire, past the drying laundry, past the small shrine someone has already built with a crude statue of a cow made out of clay and button eyes. You follow the sound out of the village, down a narrow dirt path, toward the marshes. The boy calls after you. If she lets you near the pond, tell her she still owes me a cucumber. You don't ask. You just wave. Because this, you think, is no longer about logic. This is myth. And it's walking on 4 muddy legs somewhere just ahead of you. The path grows softer under your feet. Moss replaces dust. Ferns curl in from the edges, brushing your ankles like curious fingers. The air thickens heavy with that damp, sweet smell of standing water and something older, something that doesn't have a name but lives in all marshes. You hear her before you see her. A rustle, a snort, a slurp. Then there she is, knee-deep in a pond, chewing lazily on lily pads like it's a salad bar made just for her. The water reaches her belly. A bird sits on her back, preening. She does not notice or care. She glances at you, then returns to chewing. No acknowledgement, no alarm. Just the faint flick of one ear that might mean, oh, you again, or might mean winds picking up. You step closer. The water's edge sucks at your shoes. The mud grabs at your toes like it's trying to remember you. Still you wade forward, calf deep now, until you're just a few feet away. She watches you with those endless eyes, huge glassy brown-black pools that reflect nothing and everything. You clear your throat. It feels absurd. You say, "Hi." She sneezes. It's loud, wet, unapologetic. A frog jumps out of the water nearby in panic. You laugh. She returns to chewing. You stay there for a while, not speaking, not thinking, just listening to the marsh breathe. Somewhere a dragonfly clicks past your ear. A turtle plops off a log. The bird on her back flaps, once settles again. Eventually, you sit. The mud is cold and alive beneath you. And slowly, without realizing it, you start to hum. Not a song you know, just a sound. Low, wordless, shaky at first, then steadier, like water over a hollow log. The cow turns slightly. One ear flicks again. You hum louder. Still no reaction. But somehow that feels right. You're not performing. You're not asking for approval. You're just here, in the marsh, with a cow making a sound. It's a strange kind of music, less about beauty and more about belonging. You hum until your throat goes dry, then stop and listen. She chews. You smile, because now you get it. She wasn't trying to win. She wasn't even trying to moo. She just did. Because that's what cows do. Because that's what she does. And maybe the reason it silenced Apollo, maybe the reason it stuck in your bones, is that it reminded everyone what it feels like to be untouchably, unapologetically yourself. You lie back in the marsh grass. You let the mud soak your sleeves. And for a long time, you do nothing. Not because you're lazy, not because you're tired, but because there's something sacred in the stillness. Something ancient. Something that says, this is enough. You are enough. Just like this. The cow snorts again, louder this time. Then she turns, and for the first time all day, she actually looks at you. Not past you, not through you, at you. And in that slow, damp, slightly ridiculous gaze, you feel something shift. Like the marsh itself just whispered a secret in your ear. A secret you'll never remember with your mind, but one your body will never forget. The next morning, you're back in the village. Though, to be honest, you're not quite sure how. You remember the marsh, the cow, the stillness. And then, sleep, a dream, a moo that carried you home. Whatever happened, you wake up in a borrowed bed with straw in your hair and the vague taste of moss on your tongue. Outside the village is already awake. People are sweeping. Chickens are arguing. Somewhere a child is enthusiastically shouting about a rock shaped like a potato. But something's different. Not louder, not quieter, just warmer. You step outside and someone hands you a bun. No words, just a nod, like you're one of them now, like anyone who's watched a god get defeated by a cow has earned their place in line. You bite the bun. It's surprisingly good, still warm, a little sweet, with some kind of seed that gets stuck in your teeth, but feels worth it anyway. You wander to the town square, and there, painted hastily on a wall, is a mural. Apollo on one side, dramatic as always, 1 foot on a rock, lyre lifted like it's about to cast a spell. On the other side, the cow, mid-moo, eyes closed, blissful, radiating indifference. Between them, a garland of musical notes that spell nothing and everything. It's, honestly, kind of beautiful. Someone whistles beside you. You turn to see an old man squinting at the mural. Looks like him, he says. The god. Bit shinier in person, though. You nod. He points at the cow. She's got the look, too. All sleepy and smug. Like she knows how the world ends and it's with grass, not fire. You chuckle. He doesn't. He pats your shoulder. Some say she's an omen, he adds. Others say she's just a cow. Then he walks off, trailing the smell of fish and old leather. You sit beneath the mural. Watch a bee land on the god's painted forehead. It lingers, then flies to the cow's nose. You think it knows where it belongs. More villagers gather. Some bring food. Some bring stories. Some bring more paint. Soon you're surrounded by people retelling the entire ridiculous saga, each version more exaggerated than the last. In one, the cow sprouted wings. In another, Apollo wept and composed a song called Sonata for a Lost Moo. You don't correct them. You just listen. Because somewhere in all the retellings, the truth lives, not the facts, but the feeling, that moment when time slowed, when music lost, when mooing won. And somewhere probably far from here, Apollo is sitting on a rock, still stewing, still rewriting the chords of his own embarrassment. But here the cow is legend. You close your eyes for a second, and you can still hear it, that long, low, gently absurd sound. The one that reminded the world it didn't need to be louder, it just needed to be. By midday, the mural has doubled in size. Someone's added a goat in the corner, dramatically fainting. Someone else has drawn Apollo's lyre, snapping in two, which is historically inaccurate, but deeply satisfying. The cow remains serenely unbothered, as if even in paint she cannot be rattled. You're handed a brush. You hesitate. A little girl tugs at your sleeve and says, "Add the frog." You blink. What frog? She rolls her eyes, the one that leapt out when the cow sneezed. That's the best part. You paint the frog. It looks more like a pebble with legs, but she's thrilled. Perfect, she declares, and runs off to paint grass around it bright, improbable green that grows in long curls up the mural's sides. You take a step back and look. The wall is chaos and harmony and oddly moving. No one here is a professional painter. Some of the notes have too many flags. The shading is questionable. Apollo's chin looks like a potato. But somehow the whole thing pulses with life, like it matters, like it means something. Behind you, the conversation turns philosophical. One old man declares that cows should now be consulted before any major decision. A weaver counters that the cow was clearly a manifestation of Earth's ancient voice. A teenager suggests forming a choir made entirely of cows, which garners serious head nods from at least 3 aunts. You sit quietly and listen. There's something sacred about the way the story is spreading, not from priests or scrolls or scholars, but from mouths full of bread and hands full of paint. Each retelling adds color. Each embellishment adds truth. You wonder if this is how myths begin, not in fire, not in prophecy, but in laughter and stew and a really good mural. A dog barks suddenly. Everyone turns. It's staring at the edge of the forest where the trees are just beginning to glow with late afternoon sun. Then a sound, soft, familiar, a moo. The villagers freeze. A child drops her brush. The wind picks up. The moo comes again, closer this time, deeper, like thunder through pudding, and then, stepping casually from between 2 trees, like she's returning from a very relaxing vacation, comes the cow, still chewing, still damp, still entirely unfazed. She walks straight into the square. No flourish, no fanfare, just clip-clop, squish, squish. People part like waves. The mural stares at her. She stares back. Someone bows. Someone else weeps. The girl with the frog mural drops her brush, clasps her hands and whispers, "She came back to see her painting. You don't know if that's true. But you also don't care. Because right now, anything feels possible." The cow stops in the center of the square, looks around, then lies down, right there, on the cobblestones, like a queen returning to her throne. Everyone exhales. You do too. Because of course she came back. Not for glory, not for worship, just for the grass, which someone is already bringing her in a woven basket. She takes a bite, and the moment holds, not tense, not fragile, just full. The square becomes quiet, not reverent, not afraid, just peaceful. The kind of peace that makes you forget you were ever worried about anything. Someone sighs, someone else sits. And just like that, the entire village settles down around her, as if she's not a cow, but a center, a still point in a world that spins too fast. And maybe for a little while, that's exactly what she is. It's evening now. The sky is doing that slow burn thing where gold melts into pink, then mauve, then that deep velvet blue that makes even the loudest people speak in softer tones. The village square has become something else entirely. A camp, a shrine, a quiet celebration. There's no music playing, no dancing, no dramatic speeches. Just people gathered talking in pairs, or lying back on blankets, passing around baskets of food, and the occasional overripe fig. And in the middle of it all, the cow, asleep, curled into herself like a hillock of fur and warmth and inexplicable serenity. Someone's put a wreath on her head. It's crooked. She hasn't noticed. You sit near her, sipping something mildly fermented from a carved-out gourd. It tastes like apples and bad decisions, but you don't stop drinking. Beside you, the boy with the flute from earlier reappears. He sits, stretches out his legs, and casually says, "She dreams in grass." You raise an eyebrow. He nods like he's seen it. Full meadows, endless, no fences, nothing bites. You glance at the cow. She twitches in her sleep. A soft, throaty huff escapes her lips. You whisper, "Do you think she knows she beat a god?" The boy grins. "I think she doesn't care." You both laugh quietly. A moth flutters past your ear. Somewhere behind you, someone starts humming, not a song, just a low looping sound. Others join in. A chorus of contentment. It doesn't rise, doesn't demand. Just sits there in the air like steam from a warm pot. You realize you're humming too, and so is the cow. You barely notice it at first. Just a long, low rumble from deep inside her belly. Not quite a snore, not quite a moo, just presence. It vibrates through the ground, through your spine, and for a moment you feel anchored, not held down, not stuck, just placed, like you're finally exactly where you're supposed to be. The boy whispers, "You know, some say she was the first sound, before the stars, before the gods, just her, mooing into the void." You nod, because that feels true, not factually, but truthfully. There's a difference. A woman nearby is sketching the cow by firelight. Her paper keeps catching the wind, so she's holding it down with a jar of pickled onions. The drawing is terrible, lopsided, and shaggy, but her eyes are shining like she's seen a miracle. A toddler walks up and gently pets the cow's back. She doesn't stir. He leaves a single flower on her flank, a daisy, crumpled but proud. And you wonder, what is it about this creature? She doesn't speak. She doesn't shine. She doesn't perform. She just is. And that somehow has become the holiest thing in the village. Not the God song, not the story itself, but the reminder it left behind that there is power in stillness, that not all meaning comes wrapped in lightning, that sometimes the greatest act of defiance is to remain unmoved. The cow shifts slightly, lets out a long, breathy sigh, and you feel something shift in you too, like a tightness you didn't know you were holding, finally lets go. The stars begin to bloom above. Someone lights another fire, and the village, this odd, wonderful place, sinks slowly into night, not with ceremony, not with fear, just a gentle exhale, like everyone here finally believes for just a little while that things might actually be okay, because the cow is here, and she is sleeping, and her dreams are green. The fork, once a mere utensil of the ordinary, now stands as a symbol of social class. Introduced into European society in the 11th century, the fork was initially met with resistance, even scorn. For many years, it was seen as an unnecessary tool. After all, why not continue to use hands or spoons which had sufficed for centuries? But as the centuries rolled on, particularly through the 16th century, the fork slowly but surely found its way into the royal courts of Italy, France, and eventually England. Yet even in these privileged circles, it remained a rare and highly coveted item. It wasn't until the early 17th century that forks began to appear more regularly in the homes of Europe's aristocracy, albeit in a highly refined form. The fork became an item of luxury and sophistication. Made of gold, silver, or in some cases even ivory, the fork wasn't just for eating. It was a statement piece, a tool that marked one's elevated status. The rich were able to afford these finely crafted pieces, and the social implications of using a fork extended far beyond the dinner table. Those who adopted the fork were seen as cultured and modern. Meanwhile, the common folk who could not afford the luxury of these expensive utensils continued to use their hands, much to the amusement of the upper classes. As the fork's popularity grew, so too did the variety of designs. A fork could have anywhere between 2 to 6 prongs depending on the region, and they were often ornately decorated, sometimes featuring intricate patterns, or even family crests. The shape of the fork was just as much a point of pride as its material, with each design sending a message about the wealth and taste of its owner. The introduction of the fork in formal banquets was accompanied by a shift in the cultural perception of eating. No longer was dining a communal, informal event. It became a formalized ritual with specific rules governing how each piece of silverware should be used. Forks were seen as a way to maintain one's dignity at the table, promoting elegance, cleanliness, and most importantly, social distinction. In this section, we look at how the fork became more than just a utensil, how it symbolized the shifting dynamics of European society. What was once a tool for the wealthy became a symbol of privilege, and over time it reshaped not only the dining table, but also the very concept of what it meant to be cultured. As we settle further into the dim, flickering light of our medieval feast, let's continue exploring the world of utensils, specifically the mysterious, feared fork. At first glance, the fork is an innocuous tool, isn't it? Small, sleek, and useful. Today, it's a staple at every table, wielded without a second thought. But back then, it wasn't so simple. Imagine yourself sitting in a grand hall, the sounds of goblets clinking and roasted meats sizzling. The air is thick with anticipation, yet you feel a strange unease in the pit of your stomach. There's a fork on the table in front of you, not the modern silver version you know, but a crude, almost alien tool. The metal is dull, the prongs slightly uneven. You glance at your neighbors, trying to gauge their reaction. Are they as uncomfortable as you? Can they sense the underlying danger? Because in medieval times, forks were seen as a potential weapon, or worse, a tool of the devil. It wasn't just superstition that drove this fear. People were extremely cautious about anything that wasn't explicitly sanctioned by the Church. The Catholic Church held significant influence over daily life, and many practices were considered either holy or sinful. Eating with a fork was seen as unholy for a number of reasons. First, it violated the natural order. Using your hands to eat was part of God's design. In the eyes of many, forks were a sign of indulgence or arrogance. They were a way to distance oneself from the simple, humble act of eating, an attempt to be like the wealthy aristocracy, who were seen as indulging in decadent and sinful behavior. Second, forks were linked to vanity. At a time when humility was highly valued, using such a tool was seen as a reflection of excess, an act of pride and self-concern. You might think of your fork as a simple, helpful object, but in the medieval mindset, it was far more than that. It was a tool of the devil, perhaps even an attempt to challenge God's natural order. But there was also a more practical fear to contend with. Forks were often made of poorly constructed metal, and those prongs could easily break off, causing injury to the user. A sharp, jagged prong could certainly find its way into an eye or throat, turning what was intended to be a simple act of eating, into a potentially dangerous experience. And let's not forget the social implications. Forks were closely associated with the upper class, and their use was restricted to those who could afford the luxury of dining at grand tables with intricate etiquette. For commoners, to use a fork was an act of rebellion, an attempt to impersonate the nobility, something that wasn't to be done lightly. Now take a deep breath, letting this strange moment settle in. You're no longer in your own time, but have drifted back, far back to a moment where even the simplest of utensils could spark fear, superstition, and social division. As you sit there, holding that fork, perhaps with a slight tremor, in your hand, you realize that the dinner before you is not just a meal. It's a battlefield of beliefs, a clash of classes, and even a whisper of the divine. This, my friend, is why medieval people feared their forks.